हरि ओम। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्यावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोति प्रवरं मुनीनां पातञ्जलि प्राञ्जलिना नतोऽस्मि। हरि ओम। In the 30 odd sutras that we have studied is in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the major focus is on mind. The enormous importance given by Patanjali Maharaj to the mind indicates that we need not think of anything else in this world, including our body, but we must focus on the mind. Is mind normal and natural thing, or it is an artificial extra accessory that we have? It's a very fundamental question. I have a mind, but having a mind, is it a natural thing? And if it is not a natural thing, then why is it existing? The mind is an aberration, is an abnormality of antakarana. What is the origin of this mind? The origin of mind is distorted interaction of antakarana with the world around. In other words, the very interaction of the antakarana with the things around have gone in the wrong direction, creating an evolute called mind. So if the foundation of a building has created a superstructure which is completely wrong in its direction as well as base, it is bound to fall down, or it is bound to create trouble and problems. And what is the solution for that? The solution is to demolish the structure and leave the original structure as it is. Now, how do we demolish the mind? A demolition of a thing is possible when we functionally annihilate that thing. You cripple the functions, the structure is as good as destroyed. So the whole attempt, the whole panacea of the thought process in Patanjali Yoga Sutra is deep philosophical study of mind. And by knowing the mind, studying the mind, we have to destroy the mind. That mind is called vritti. So absence of vritti is absence of mind. The vritti originates in the substratum of chitta. The false building is erected on the true foundation. So only the false building is to be demolished. The true foundation automatically remains. This mind being an abnormal evolute, its effect is also equally a vulgar expression. And the vulgar expression of abnormal evolute called mind is called thought. If we are so sure after Patanjali Maharaja's instruction about the mind, then the focus has to go towards the mind. A close and a minute and a deep study, penetrative study by Patanjali Maharaj tells us that the mind has certain effects or functional abnormalities. And mind is not a structure, so it can never be demonstrated by five senses. Mind is a functional evolute. And a functional evolute can only be demonstrated by effects. In Sanskrit, it is called karyanumeyi, the one that is ascertained through the effects, not through the structure. Show me the intelligent. A person is intelligent, we say. If we say, show me the intelligence, you can't show the intelligence, but you can show the intelligent functioning. So if the mind is to be demonstrated through functioning, then observing its functions is as good as observing its body. If effects or functions of the mind are known, then by extinguishing or destroying these functions, we can destroy the mind. To destroy the mind, which is our aim, or let us use a better word coined by none other than Gurudeva, if we have to do the suicide of the mind. Why suicide? Because I do it of my mind. I do the suicide of the mind. That means I voluntarily undertake a process of annihilating my mind, destroying my mind, dissolving my mind, and reaching a state where there is no mind, called amana avastha. And the key to do this destruction, which is also the key to the original foundation, is to observe and study its effects. The effects are nothing else but the obstacles created by mind in realizing the original foundation. And these obstacles are called as antaraya. Ishvara pranidhanena instrumental case, through the pranidhana of Ishvara, which is in the form of Omkara tasya vachakaha tajapena. By doing the recitation or the japa of the Omkara, which is representative of the Ishvara, antaraya abhavascha bhavati. Antaraya, obstacles, are removed, means the mind is destroyed. So, these antarayas are obstacles which are nothing else but the functional evolutes of mind, are under study in the Sutra 30, wherein 9 Nava Antaraya, 9 obstacles have been told to us. And 9 abnormal functionalities of the mind which keep us away from our original chitta, antakarana, are described in the 30th sutra, of which Vyadhi, Styana, Pramada, Samshaya. These we have studied during the last session. Alasya is the 5th antaraya, or the obstacle or the functional evolute of the mind. What is alasya? Slowly we are now entering into the practical aspect of Yoga Shastra. Yoga Shastra itself is a practical darshanam. Anukaraniya darshanam, implementable philosophy. With close concentration, we have to now focus, because something of our use is coming. Instead of hovering around a plethora of subjects, it is better to focus at the roots. Patanjali Maharaj is slowly going towards practical hints and aspects of how we should lead our life. Our life should be led with a single purpose and motive of destroying the mind or the functional evolutes, which are exhibited through the 9 obstacles or the antarayas, of which 4 we have seen. Alasyam is what we are going to see. Alasyam has been described as alasya kayasya chittasya gurutvad pravrutti. Kayasya, of the body, chittasya, of the mind, gurutvad pravrutti. Gurutva, guru means heaviness. Planet Guru is the heaviest of all. Astronomy might have discovered it pretty late, but the Hindu Shastra knew that Guru is heavy planet. That's why they named it as Guru. Guru is heaviness. Heaviness of body and mind is alasya. Every single word in the sutra and the bhashya is precise. Heaviness of the body, the whole medical science is exploding with the word obesity, overweight. That is why Gorakshanath Maharaj in the Siddhanta book has given that a yogi has to have a lean body. Meet ahari, taking very less diet, having lean body, not lanky, lean body is a sign of a yogi, because lean body means there is no gurutva, no heaviness. Mind well, mind attends to everything, and its attention to the things is proportionate to how many things he is supposed to attend. When we have a heavy body, each and every cell needs to be attended to. It is an additional work to the mind. Not to mention, it is an additional workload to the organs. But whether it is heart, lung, or anything else, all of them are regulated by the mind. Because Patanjali Maharaj says, Vyadhi, disease, happens in the body, originates in the mind. If everything originates in the mind, then a mind that is preoccupied with multiple things is a heavy mind. For a heavy body, the heaviness comes because of what goes in. Ahar, avrite. The definition of ahar by Shankaracharya says, whatever is taken in by body and mind is called ahar. What are the things that we take in? The food, the breath, these two. And the third thing is mind. What is the ahara for the mind? Vishaya. So ahara, shvasa, prashvasa, and Vishaya, these are the three things called ahara, ahrute, that which is taken in by the body and the mind. Excessive intake of these three leads to the heaviness of body and mind. So for the diet, one can regulate the food so that the quantum intake of the food and mind well, it is not only the quantity, but the quality also matters a lot. So you may be involved in few subjects, but they are intense subject. Let's say one subject of a woman. It's one subject, but intense enough to have potential like thousands of subjects. So the quantity and the quality of what goes in for the body and the mind is directly proportional to the heaviness or the gurutvat pravrutti of kayasya and chittasya cha. For the yogi or the one who is really serious about Patanjali Yoga Shastra study, as a sadhaka, shall immediately take a vow to regulate his food, which is the grossest of the thing and easiest to do. If that is done, the gurutvat pravrutti of the shariram is taken care of. Then for the mind, reduce the number of subjects that are coming in contact. Matra sparshastu kaunteya dhyayate vishayan pumsa. All these point out to this particular aspect of the mind, that the mind should have less burden inside. To have less burden inside, one must train the mind and learn the mind to not to intake more than one subject at a time. The key to have one subject at a time in the mind is to get involved in that subject fully. We are so attuned to the wrong working of the mind that we have forgotten that our mind is working in the wrong way and continuously creating the antaraya And that is why every single individual that comes across these days talks about, I am tired, I am fatigued, the mind wants rest, I'm really bogged down. To avoid this, a yogi, after taking care of his body, takes care of his mind by letting only one subject enter into the day-to-day functioning. If the functioning is drinking water, the yogi focuses on drinking water. In Buddhist philosophy, meditation has been given enormous importance. In the preparatory phases of Vipassana, in certain Southeast Asian nations, and I was privy to a discussion with a monk from the Buddhist monastery in Brahmadesh. And in that monastery, I saw the monks practicing this art of focusing on one subject at a time. And the exercise given was extremely surprising. The monks had lined up in the lawn of the monastery, and they were supposed to walk a distance of just 10 feet. That was the extent of the lawn. But they took almost half an hour to cross 10 feet because they were asked to focus on the walk. So every monk was intently looking at how the feet are touching the grass, coming up, going down, turning the toes, lifting the leg, putting back on the grass at a very slow pace. As a result, enormous amount of calming effect on the mind was coming just because the focus on one aspect was reducing the entry of other thoughts in the mind. So the ahara of the mind was reduced to minimum. The gurutvad pravrutti went away, and the alasya also went away. So the alertness, as we call it, I was alert. Alertness is precisely avoiding the alasyam. After the alasyam, the next antaraya is avirati. Avirati. Rati means to get obsessively involved passionately into anything. Rati. So we all have rati towards the Vishaya. One who has given up this is called virati or virakta. But one who has never attempted this is called avirata. So there are two samasas. A and V are upasargas. A plus V plus rati, avirati. That or he who does not stop the inflow of Vishayas in his mind and is continuously embedded in Vishayas is called avirata or the Vishayi. Avirati chittasya Vishaya samprayogatma gardha. In other words, Vishaya samparkabhimukha chitta is avirati. Constantly outwardly focused on the subjects. that is an obstacle or an abnormality of the mind. Octopus has 8 limbs, mind has 9. So to kill the mind, 9 limbs have to be cut off, and this is one of the limb called avirati. If we understand the limbs properly, dhyanam is going to be easy. Mind well, meditation is nothing but stopping these functional modalities of the mind. Vyadhi, styanam, samshaya, pramad, alasya, avirati. These many, if we are able to avoid, a good amount of achievement is done. If we do not do this, howsoever you may try to sit in meditation, it is a futile exercise, Maharaj. We come across many people talking about half an hour meditation, 1 hour meditation, whole night meditation. I have even come across such groups. No, sir, it is not possible. You cannot be swimming in the mud and claim that you had a clean water bath. Cannot, because the water is muddy. So the mind, unless it is a training of the mind, means stopping its avirati, stopping its antaraya, obstacles, or the functional modifications. And that is why vyadhi, alasya, sthyan, samshaya, pramad, these can be avoided by keeping yourself physically and mentally healthy. Remain in solitude. Solitude is one of the important aspects to keep the mind away from subjects and vishayas. One who is very serious about his progress in yoga or atma darshanam or kaivalyam cannot afford to be immersed in the world. Cut down those branches of your mind which have really penetrated in this world so deeply. We all watch the television or the movie. We all know it is wrong or it is completely a lie because it is fictitious. It is created as an act. It is not a true. Yet we watch the television or the movie, get immersed into it, cry with the character that is crying, feel the emotions of those characters, pass a comment about what is a great acting he has done, knowing fully well it is an act, not the truth. And yet it creates emotional upheaval in us. Precisely this way, the world is a television serial or a movie. Appears absolutely true. We get involved into it. We try to derive pleasure out of it. A false thing cannot give a pleasure. The friends with whom the mind runs to enjoy the weekend. Look at what has happened to the mind after the 3 days holiday that is happening now. The mind immediately starts saying, yes, what for those 3 days? Where do we go? What do we eat? Whom do we meet? Let's have some camping trip. Let's have this, let's have that. Look, the mind has become unbridled. Mind well, this is the point of inflection. This is the point where the mind has slipped away. This is the point where the antaraya, the obstacles are becoming prominent. None of us would think that there is a 3 days holiday. It could be useful for me to complete one scripture and think about it. No, that thought will not come. Why? Because we tend to remain in the state of pramada. The mind is trained and tuned to be in the world. The Yoga Shastra tells us to untrain the mind and be out of the world. And that is why avirati, least possible physical and mental involvement into the world around. And if at all the mind is hell-bent on getting involved, then to involve it in vidhayaka krutya. The welfare act of the mind is to involve the mind in Adhyatma or Sri Krishna, Sri Rama, Bhajanam, Kirtanam, Navavidha Bhakti, Shravanam, Smaranam, Vishnoho, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Sakhyam, Dasyam, Atmanivedanam. All these are ways of putting the mind, if at all we are not able to pull it away from the Vishayas. So shift it from malified things to bona fide things. But Patanjali Maharaj says, why even bona fide things? Do not use the evolutes of mind at all. A practice of diverting the mind from the obstacles and bringing it back to its original Chitta Swarupa is an act of meditation. After avirati, the next antaraya or the obstacle is Bhranti Darshanam. Bhranti Darshana is nothing else but Viparyaya Jnanam. That which appears to me is different and false than what it actually is. This is called Bhranti. A Bhranti can be of different things. A Bhranti can be false knowledge. The only true knowledge according to Patanjali Yoga Sutra is the Yoga Sutra knowledge. Instead, if you believe in some other darshana, then it is called Bhranti Darshana. Second, darshana means experience. So during the act of yoga, you do get some powers in you because of widening of the boundaries of knowledge. You get what is called as siddhis. Those siddhis make you different than the common people. So there is an element in you that feels that I am a siddhi dharaka. The feeling that I am powerful because of the siddhis is also a bhranti. Third is bhranti darshana, means during the process of yoga, there are some experiences one gets. Those experiences are like suddenly a nice fragrance starts coming from nowhere and you feel it. Sometimes some visions are seen. Bright illuminating light is seen. Swami Vivekananda, since his childhood, every night after he used to go into sleep, it was actually a meditation because he used to see a Teja Punjata, a ball of Teja, which he told Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna said, my dear boy, this is the result of your meditation. And Vivekananda, with his innocent simplicity, said, is it not that everybody gets it? And then Ramakrishna said, no, my dear child, you are exceptional. These are visions. Even he had a vision of Gautam Buddha in his room. Vivekananda Maharaj had a darshanam of But these are also called visions. So it is a Bhranti Darshana according to Patanjali Maharaj. It may lead you to believe in something you should not. It is an obstacle. Antaraya. The eighth antaraya or obstacle is alabdha bhumikatvam. The one who has mastered this first 7 or 8 obstacles then sits in meditation and tries to reach a stage where the mind is destroyed, which is called samadhi avastha. We have seen in detail everything about the samadhi, the samprajnat, the asamprajnat, the dharma megha, all we have seen. The one who tries to reach higher stage of samadhi, because that is the stage in which mind stops existing and we are victorious in destroying the mind. What remains is only chitta, without any volute, without any vritti. But to reach that stage, it is difficult because every time with concentration you try to reach there, you fall down. That means you come down. This is called alabdha bhumikatva. The bhumika of samadhi is not obtained. Alabdhabtvat. Alabdha bhumikatvam samadhi bhumihi labhaha. So the yogi keeps on trying again with great grit. He sits in solitude, again focuses on mind, and then tries to draw his mind upwards towards the goal. The goal in which he tries to dissolve himself. The mind gets dissolved. Unfortunately, it's not easy. So that is another obstacle. And if at all one reaches that stage, then he doesn't remain in that state for a long time and comes down again. That is called anavastitvam. Labdhayam bhumau chittasya apratishtha. The samadhi that was obtained does not last, and you have a skhalana, you drop down. This drop down is called anavastitvam. Not to achieve samadhi bhumika is alabdha bhumikatvam, and not to maintain the samadhi is anavastitvam. These are 9 obstacles of the chitta. These are chitta vikshepa antaraya, 9 in number. These are also called as yoga mala. Now you know that chitta shuddhi is done by mala vikshepa. We have seen those obstacles. Mala obstacle, we have heard so many times, but true meaning of mala is this nava mala. So yoga mala, it is also called yoga pratipaksha, that which opposes yoga. These obstacles oppose yoga, so it is also called yoga pratipaksha or yoga antaraya. Ete chitta vikshepa nava yoga mala yoga pratipaksha yoga antaraya ityabhidhiyate. These are 9 obstacles of yoga, which are vyadhisthana samshaya pramada alasya avirati bhranti darshana alabdha bhumikatva anavastitva. Now these 9 we are constantly suffering from. Anyone who is suffering from any of these 9 or multiple of these 9s is a person which is not a yogi. His yoga bhrashta or yoga bhramsha has happened to him. Now these modifications or these antarayas, these obstacles, when they happen, that time we get some experiences. which are called as vikshepa sahabhuhu, those which happen simultaneously along with these obstacles. In other words, if one of these 9 are present, then you are bound to suffer from associated anomalies, associated issues. And what are those associated issues? Dukkha daurmanasya angam ejayatva shwasa prashwasa vikshepa sahabhuvaha. This is 31st sutra. Because of the 9 obstacles of the mind, we experience 5 issues. And those 5 issues are dukkha, daurmanasya, ejayatvam, and shwasa prashwasa. 4, not 5, 4. Mind well, we are all suffering from these 4 because we have one or more of those 9 antarayas. What is our issue in this world? Yadi dukkham nam jagati na syat shastra jidnasa na bhavet. Why would you study a scripture and come early morning to Patanjali Yoga Sutra if there is no dukkha in your life? This is Vachaspati Mishra's statement. Dukkha is the sign of the life. Imagine dukkha virahita jivana. What is the need of studying anything? Dukkha is the crux of our problem. And Patanjali Maharaj says, this is nothing else but vikshepa sahabhu. This comes as an additional bonus for those who are having those 9 issues. The linkage is mind having 9 obstacles, which then gives rise to 4 issues. And the first of that is dukkha. What is dukkha? See, it is a sutra grantha. Everything has to be defined and precisely cleavaged, cut properly, dissected properly. So, dukkha is dukkha adhyatmikam, adhibhautikam, adhidaivikam cha. Till now, whatever we studied about adhidaivika, adhibhautika in the Purushottam Yoga, etc., originates from this particular sutra. Dukkha adhyatmikam, adhibhautikam, adhidaivikam cha yena abhihataha prani nastad upaghataya prayatante tad dukkham. What is the definition of dukkha? That which troubles and because of which all animals try their level best to annihilate is called dukkha. It is of 3 types, adhibhautika, adhidaivika, and adhyatmika. But by definition, it is something which every jiva wants to destroy. Dukkha. What is adhyatmika dukkha? Sharira vyadhi vashat, manasam kamadi vashat. See the way the dukkham has been explained. Shariram vyadhi vashat. If you have a disease in the body, and mind well, disease doesn't mean you have to be sick. Disease even means I don't feel like doing anything. I'm feeling heavy. The body is tired. It's a disease. The body is not meant for getting tired. It requires sleep, all right. But after the sleep is done, why should a body be ever complaining for the work? It should not. If it does, something is wrong with the body. Whatever is wrong with the body has come from the food that you have eaten. So even a healthy body, when it's a wrong food, the body doesn't feel like functioning. So that becomes vyadhi. It gets corrected because the food gets digested after 2-3 hours. You may feel like working again, but you did suffer. A yogi will have his food and can still sit for meditation. Why? Because his blood flow is not enormously directed towards the stomach to digest the food, because he's a meat ahari. Few fruits, a little bit of gorasa milk should be more than enough as a diet for a yogi. He eats lightly, he's light like air in the body and always alert and active. Mahatma Gandhi is an ideal example of how much food to eat. Very little. He was the person with BMI of 19. Mind well, medically speaking, no one in this world has ever suffered from heart attack who has less than 20 BMI. There is not a single case on record in the history of mankind that somebody had an heart attack and he was less than 20 in BMI. I'm talking it from the standpoint of medicine. Now there is so much of talk about weight, obesity, BMI. Our yogis have realized it much earlier. Heart attack is the disgusted expression of the body, even the heaviness of the body. That is why Vyadhi for Sharir. And you may be having absolute athletic body. You may be Usain Bolt as a 100-meter runner, but still you can have Adhyatmik Dukkha because mind. Usain Bolt is training very hard for 100 meters of race. What about the training of the mind? If the mind is not trained properly, the way body needs to be trained, then the mind also is unhealthy. Unhealthy again because of its ahar. The ahar of the mind is vichar and the vishaya. So if you have got vichara and a vishaya, vichar coming from the smriti and vishaya coming from the present, and contemplation projecting into the future, if these are constantly happening, then you are a kami person, and kama vashad manasam vyadhihi. So that is called adhyatmika dukkha. Second dukkha is adhibhautikam, vyagradi prani janita pida. Some other bhuta matra causing trouble to me. Mosquitoes, snake, tiger. Shall I add other human beings? You can. Adhibhautika means be careful of the bhutas around you. All the living beings, whatever. That is why you must have seen a yogi sits on a Vyagrajana, tiger skin, older days, because tiger skin was an opposing effect on crawling insects so that it doesn't disturb the body. So all the bhuta matras which can trouble you, we have to take care against that. Adhidaivika dukkha grahadi janita pida. Graha adi janita pida. We do not know that the world that we stay in is interplay of cosmic forces coming from variety and myriad of things that are around us, many of which we are unknown, which are not known to us. How the moon exercises its influence on the tides of the sea is beyond our understanding. And if a moon can exercise this much of influence, then the other planets influencing the nature, indirectly influencing us as a part of the nature, all these have, in the modern language, we call it environmental impact, which is nothing else but grahadi janita pida. So that is called adhidaivika. A lightning striking from the sky directly on your head, leading to the death. Adhidaivikam. So these are three different types of dukkham we have. So dukkham is nothing else but yena abhihataha praninastat upaghataya prayatante. They do efforts to destroy that which causes adhyatmika, adhibhautika and adhidaivika dukkha. So dukkha is the one first accompanying effect of the obstacles. Saha vikshepa saha bhuhu. Second effect is daurmanasya. What is daurmanasya? Ichha vidhata chetasaha kshobha. Ichha vidhata chetasaha kshobha. The turbulent mind because of non-fulfillment of desires. Observe very closely our own mind. Our mind harbors ill feelings inside mainly because whatever I want, it doesn't happen. There is a constant failure feeling inside the mind. I don't have the type of husband I wanted. I don't have the child of the type. I don't have the wife of the type. My colleagues are not up to the mark. The money is there, but not what I really deserve. Everything is coming like I haven't received the due I'm worth for. This is daurmanasya. And this leads to what? Kshobha, anger. I swear my wife. I swear my husband. Daurmanasya is because non-fulfillment of the desire. What happens if you accept everything the way it is? Because as it is, it has come to you because of you only. Very calmly, if you observe this, suppose you forgot the sweater while walking in the winter. You naturally have a pida of the winter air. It will be cold outside, your body may shiver, which is not a pleasant feeling. But how much kshobha we have? How did I forget the sweater? It is my wife, she never packs things properly. All this blah, 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 blah. What is happening? Tossing up the mind for non-fulfillment of the desire. A yogi would think it this way, all right, I forgot it. I shouldn't have forgotten it. But now that I have forgotten, let me be where I am. There will be some problem with the body. Let it be for some time. Shanta avastha. Accepting whatever is happening around you. Whenever things are beyond your control because of prarabdha. So remind well, one famous secret key to the sadhana is in vyavahara, prarabdham is powerful. In adhyatma, prayatnam is powerful. So every vyavahara has to be dealt by adhyatma. So whatever is happening in vyavahara, give the credence to the prarabdha. But whatever is expected of you to react, give the credence to the prayatna. And prayatna is to accept. First of all, don't have the desire. Second, if you have the desire and if it is not fulfilled, very good. If it is fulfilled, very good. Either way, it should not create commotion. When an unfulfilled desire creates a commotion, it is called daurmanasya. The third sahabhu or associated effect is ejayatvam. Ejayatvam means yad angam ejayati kampayati tad angam ejayatvam. Ejati means kampayaman, trembling. When we are very angry, we obviously see the body shakes. But mind well, What Patanjali Maharaj is pointing is a very minute observation. Every reaction creates a flutter in the body, a tremor in the body. You may not perceive it, but it happens. Every single disappointment creates a wave inside. You may not feel it. In an obvious outrage of anger, you feel it. Your body shakes, the blood pressure shoots up. All right. That's an absolute vulgar expression of your anger. But even when you don't express your anger and apparently smile, inside you are burning. Inside you're shaking. That is called ejayatvam. Dukkha daurmanasya ejayatvam and shwasa prashwasa. Now this is something very interesting. Those 9 obstacles creating these 4 major symptoms like dukkha daurmanasya ejayatvam, that can be understood. But shwasa prashwasa is breathing, no, how it can be the effect and a bad effect? That is where Patanjali Maharaj's peculiarity lies. And the Yoga Shastra is the only Shastra which has caught hold of one important system of the body, and that is respiratory system. The whole medicine is focused on cardiovascular system. Right now, everyone is talking about heart, heartbeat, coronary, blockage, everything. Yoga Shastra has been talking only of one system, the respiratory system, the Shwasa Prashwasa. Then how Shwasa Prashwasa of the breathing can be a Vikshepa Sahabu, obstacle? And then the explanation is Prano yad bahyam vayum achamati sashwasaha. To take the air inside, achaman karne. What is achaman? You do achamanam while doing puja. Similarly, you do achamanam of the vayu. Prano yat bahyam, from outside. Vayum achamati iti shwasaha. So that act which takes the air from outside to inside is called shwasa. And yat koshtyam vayu nissarayati saprashwasaha. That which takes koshtyam from the body, that which propels the air outside is called prashwasa. So shwasa is inhalation, prashwasa is exhalation. Then how they can be an obstacle? Patanjali Maharaj is trying to say the way we breathe is an obstacle, not the breathing. The natural breathing is lost. By whom? One who is suffering from these obstacles. So right now, right here, all of us are not breathing the way we are supposed to breathe. That's an obstacle. So what we do is not puraka rechaka. What we do is a shwasa prashwasa. Because of the effect of the body and the mind, the breathing is altered. This altered breathing is shwasa prashwasa. The natural breathing is puraka rechaka and kumbhaka of pranayama. So pranayama is ayama, disciplining the pranas, disciplining the breathing. That means right now it is not disciplined. The most worst ill discipline of the breathing we see when we are in the obvious commotions. Your breathing is very fast. Why? Because you are angry. That is an absolute vulgar representation of breathing. But even the breathing that we do normally, do we know that medically speaking, we are supposed to breathe for twice the amount than the inhaling? The inhaling exhaling ratio is supposed to be 1:2. Observe yourself, ours is never. We are supposed to breathe completely. We don't. So what happens if I'm supposed to take every breath deep? Instead, when I take half, because I'm breathing faster, this which happens normally, that means I am not letting the purak happen completely. I am not letting the rechak happen completely. Such an obstacle is called Shwasa Prashwas. So Shwasa, inhalation, is an obstacle to Rechaka. Because when the air is supposed to come out, that's the time you start breathing again. And Prashwasa is an obstacle to Puraka Pranayama. So uncontrolled inhalation, the only jiva which is breathing properly in this world is an infant less than 1 year of age and a yogi. Everyone else is not breathing properly. A number of breaths in the life is called Ayu. Ayu, according to Shastra, is not number of heartbeats, number of breaths. Faster the number of breaths, lesser the life. Slower the number of breaths, longer the life. Right in the nature as well as in human beings. So a tortoise will live for 400 years breathing slowly. A tiger or an aggressive animal will not live more than 10 to 20 years because of faster breathing. Faster breathing is because of faster activities of body as well as mind. Mind, when you may sit at one place, the mind is racing. Breathing will be faster. Shant, steady, poised, cool, calm in thinking. Breathing slows down. Slower breathing automatically lowers the heart rate. A normal breathing of 13 or 12 as endorsed by the medical community. There are commonly people breathing at 16 to 17 per minute. A yogi breathes 2 to 3 maximum breaths per minute. That's why when he's in meditation, you barely see the chest moving. You will see more in detail about this Shwasa Prashwasa because that crux of Yoga Shastra. We are going to get lots of practical tips on true pranayama. And mind well, we are studying Yoga Shastra, Ashtanga Yoga, not the Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga also has enormous focus on pranayama, but the difference between Hatha Yoga and the Ashtanga Yoga pranayama is we are trying to come to pranayama by understanding the mind. We saw the mind, we saw different samadhis, we saw the obstacles to the mind, we saw Ishvara's role, we saw what is Omkara Sadhana, then we saw what is Vikshepa Sahabhu, associated effects of the obstacles of the mind, of which we saw Dukkham, Dormanasya, Ejayatvam and Shwasa Praswasa. Patanjali Maharaj did the pioneering research in the manner in which the modification or the vikshepa of the mind can be controlled. For which he said, if the effect are there of the obstacles, then I can either remove the obstacles or reduce the effect. Both will have the same result. You can either stop getting angry so that the respiration becomes normal, or you can control the respiration so that anger goes away. It is a very common thing we say that count till 10 when you are angry. What are you trying to do? You are calming yourself by reducing your respiration. You cannot have a very low respiratory rate and at the same time you are angry. It cannot happen, sir. Medically impossible. So the practice, exercise that can be done is either at a mental level, a psychological level, where you try to control the anger, which is a very difficult thing, or else you focus on the respiration, which is an easier approach to do, but it requires enormous amount of practice. How the breath interplays with the whole structure is the crux of information and the knowledge that is there in the Patanjali Yoga Shastra. So mind well, Shwasa Prashwasa is an abnormal breathing which we are every day doing, while Puraka Kumbhaka Rechaka is what the yogi is doing. If you want to know what is the importance of breathing, by watching the breathing of Swami Vivekananda when he was sleeping, Ramakrishna immediately prophesied that this boy will not live long. When asked why, Swamiji, why you are saying this, he said, the way he is breathing tells me that he will not live long. A slight mistake in yogic breathing can lead to derangement of the brain. That's why it is always done under the guidance of a guru. See the potentiality that breathing has. Everything revolves around breathing, because through breathing, changes in the body and the mind are exhibited. So uncontrolled inhalation, uncontrolled exhalation, this leads to disturbance in prana, which is called as oxygen in the modern language. The quantum of air that we take in, the quantum of oxygen that we take in, the pressure with which we take in, and the duration with which we keep it inside, these three factors matter in respiration, which is agreed by the medical fraternity as well as by everyone. So that is why Shwasha Prashwasa is the last Vikshepa Sahabhuhu. We shall be seeing more in details about this as we move forward. But we have seen today the 9 obstacles of the mind, Antaraya, and also the 4 associated symptoms or Vikshepa Sahabhuhu. Details of this we shall see in the next class. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Just interesting observation that you mentioned that, Ramakrishna saw Vivekananda's breathing and said that he will not live long. But I mean, Vivekananda is meant to be an extremely high, in terms of his yogic practices and achievement. So how does this,
Yes.
It seems a little contradictory.
Yes, it seems contradictory, but we need to understand one thing, that even if you breathe properly or you have a yogic breathing, that doesn't mean that you have a very long life. Your life is the jati, the ayu, and the bhoga. These are 3 things which are determined at the time of your birth according to the Shastra. So the spaces in which you will be born, the bhoga of your sensory organs, what you will be having during this particular life of yours, and ayu, how much life you will have on this earth or whatever, is predetermined as per the prarabdha. So what he meant was, though he was breathing like a yogi, by observing the type of breathing, he was able to even conclude how long he's going to live. That means the quality of breathing, even though superior, can let you know, for a knowledgeable person or a person of Ramakrishna's stature, was able to even see the length of the life through the respiration. That is the importance of the respiration. Now, if the ayu is limited, for example, there were some of the yogis, one of the disciple of Swami Vivekananda could live only for 21 years. Swami Vivekananda, 39 years. Shankaracharya, 31 years. Jnaneshwar Maharaj, 21 years. All this is because the alpa yushatva that they had was a part of the package with which they had come. But supposing you have an Ayu which is of say 80 years, and you undertake certain exercises because of which those 80 years are made to live in a manner which will help you in doing the prayatnam of the adhyatma. That is where the focus of this respiration is all about. Respiration is not about lengthening life through respiration. It is about having qualitative healthy life through respiration, one. And second, the approach of Patanjali Maharaj is by regulating the respiration, you can annihilate the mind. How long you live is immaterial. How you live is material. That is where the respiration is brought into the focus. Prolonging the Ayu is, for example, you are an asthmatic. You will have a problem in breathing. But by having pranayama practice, whatever life you have, you shall have a healthier life. The reason being, the respiration is getting controlled properly. So the control of respiration has something to do with the quality of the life that you lead rather than the length of the life that you have. Example of tortoise and this one was given because how nature has also related respiration with aggression and the quantum of life. In other words, the respiration, in the respiration lies the key to the quality of the life which you lead, because the gurutvam, alasyam, is directly reduced by controlled respiration. Hari.
Sanjay, very minor
Yes.
point. You
Yes.
talk about lean and lanky. What's the difference
Yes.
between the two?
A lanky person is, because of its constitution, he may not be putting on weight. There are many people who eat a lot but don't put on weight. These are constitutionally, we call this body morphology. So body morphology is different thing. A lean person is the one who has kept himself in physical fit shape simply because he has regulated himself in terms of diet and exercise. Such a body which is tuned with exercise, and that is why the modern science also says an obese person has less chance of having a heart attack if he's exercising than a lanky person who doesn't exercise. This is medical observation. It has come into, it is in the textbooks also. So what is a lean person means? A yogi is a shariram, is lean and supple, always active, because he puts himself to the exercise of yoga as well as some walking in the morning. You look at the most of the even Shivananda Maharaj, every morning there is to be yoga for all these sadhakas. Our own Guruji was also doing yoga. Swami Vishnu Devananda, Chinmayananda, everybody was doing it, because you have to keep the machine in the best condition. So the one who has controlled diet, controlled respiration, and continuous proper exercise of breathing as well as of the body, because yoga has both together. Simultaneous exercise of breath, that is mind, and the body is only in yoga asanam. So the one who keeps this way the body, of which only a part has been considered by medical fraternity. Today they say a lean body mass, they call it lean body mass. So BMI, that's one part of it. But a yogi does all this because this is a machine. He looks at the body as machine. If this is in perfect shape, then I'm able to do lots of things. Sitting at one place for 3 hours, we can't even sit for 1 hour, 10 minutes. That is the reason. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. Just one simple question again. You have mentioned about the 9 points for the things. In that, the fourth one is pramada.
Yes.
Pramada is in the world.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm just curious to know that when we are interacting with the world, a lot of things we are getting attached. The idea of Patanjali's Yoga Sastra, its advice is that get detached and try to reduce the number of interactions. Now, everybody is talking about a simple example. Everybody is talking about hyperloop. This all of a sudden it just come up.
Yes.
Now, when you can detach. There are many people who, when I ask my children, they said, oh, it's something new technology. But I am going deeper into and trying to learn what it exactly, and it is what opening up a lot of things like, you know,
Yes.
the technology, how it,
Yes.
and Dubai, Abu Dhabi is going to be only just 3 minutes, how much
Yes.
steel is required, from where Earth can generate that much steel.
Yes.
So many thoughts are coming. So
Yes.
is it advisable to cut off totally from this and become like an unknown person or be a known person? This is my doubt.
Ideally speaking, pramada or pramada means samadhi vireta avastha is called pramada. If you are not in samadhi, you are doing a pramada. That is the high level of definition of Patanjali Maharaj. As far as these things are concerned, supposing Hyperloop, you studied everything, and let us even presume that you got a technology better than Hyperloop and you are a Nobel Prize winning scientist. Even after winning the Nobel Prize, what has happened? What has changed in you?
Nothing.
Scripturally speaking, metaphysically speaking, adhyatma wise, nothing had changed. Otherwise, all Nobel Prize winners would have been the happiest people on the earth. They are not. While those like Gurudeva, who never must have done any Nobel Prize winning essay, but he was the happiest person on the earth. Because you enter into a state where things like Hyperloop, not only Hyperloop, all future inventions also will come to you in your mind. Your mind becomes so powerful that you come to know the entire structure of the universe. Why talk about Hyperloop? We are going to come to that in the second pada. In the sadhana pada, you will see what are the achievements a yogi can do, and your mind will start spinning. Forget this Hyperloop. Hyperloop takes you from one point to other point. But what about transporting yourself from one place to another place without any medium? That a yogi does. And not only that he does, he can teletransport you also. Brahmananda Maharaj teletransported 4 children to Madurai from 110-kilometer away village. Other people, forget about himself. When he was, his arms were cut because he appeared naked in the haram of Nawab of Arcot, and his hands were cut. He simply lifted the hands and put it back there and he walked away. What about these? Where is Hyperloop in comparison to these miracles? Now, these are not only miracles. This is called Samahita Chitta Parinamam. We are going to study that. So, we have a choice. If it is a part of your profession so that you have to make your 2 square meals meet, then it is fine. For example, I have to be a good accountant because that gives me money. So I have to be good. I may read something more about it. Agreed. But if I become extremely knowledgeable about the geography of Arizona, it doesn't give me anything. It just gives me a knowledge. Maybe I may impress few people, but I still remain an unhappy person as I am. So it is taratamya bhava. So pramada is anything other than God is pramada. Anything other than samadhi avastha is pramada. Hari.
Hari.
Yeah, do we have time if I have
Yes.
a small... we were talking about, you were talking about the prarabdha, the lifespan that is granted to you because of your past life karmas, which come with you as prarabdha.
Yes.
And then when we do the controlled breathing, or we have ayam and prana, according to the Yoga Shastra, does it mean that the prarabdha is something which I always considered that you cannot change it? If you have X years of life as per your prarabdha, it will remain as X only. But by controlling the breathing, does it mean that you would leave it, you will leave that life, not live, you will leave that life with less difficulties, healthy, and you enjoy that entire life? Or does it mean that you reduce the lifespan, even if the prarabdha says X years, it will be X minus something? That is one question. The second is if we try to compare the Vedanta, Sankhya, and Yoga Shastra, Vedanta and Yoga Shastra, I think Vedanta finds its origin from Upanishad, and it the Bhagavad Gita also finds its origin from Upanishada. And even in Upanishada, in Bhagavad Gita also, the Kriyamana karma and your Sanchita karma or Prarabdha karma, it has been very clearly said that if you have your Prarabdha with you, which comes as past karma result, then you will not be able to change it. You will have to suffer. Only you can reduce or you can change the intensity of it. So does Yoga Shastra accept that principle in Vedanta that whatever you have come with, you have to live with that, but only thing you can make it little more bearable? Does it mean that by doing yoga or something else?
All the darshanas have come from Vedas, which is Upanishads. So all the darshanas, whether it is Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya, Purva Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa, all of them are Veda Janita. That is why they are called as Astika Darshanam. Astik means not the one who believes in God. Astik means one who believes in Veda. So these are all Veda-based darshanas. As far as Prarabdha and Kriyamana Swatantra is concerned, this is something which always perplexes a sadhaka to understand. The thing that we need to understand is the paristhiti that I am in is because of Prarabdha. What is a paristhiti? I am poor, rich, tall, short, black, fair. All these are paristhithis, but also propensity of my mind is also a paristhiti. For example, I don't feel like getting up in the morning. Why? Why some people like getting up in the morning? Why some people don't? What is the reason? What is the explanation for this? It is because he has not woken up early in his past life. So there is no propensity to wake up early in the night. Now, all these propensities are classified under gunas. So if you have a sattva guna in the past, then you will have a sattva guna tendency in the present. However, the paristhiti when you have around you, the way you interact and react or respond to the paristhiti, that is where the element of Kriyamana Swatantra is there. So the Kriyamana Swatantra has to be exercised. Kriyamana Swatantra is nothing else but another word for Prayatna. So Prayatnam is an essential mental modification as a response to the situation that you are in. In fact, why are you born? Because of your Prarabdha. Otherwise, there's no need to take birth. Now that Prarabdha has given you the birth, based on what you have done, you shall continue to do that in a much better. That is called character formation. Samskara leads to vasana. Vasana leads to character. So my character, which is predominated by the gunas, that is the reason why everyone is asked in its every birth to be close to satsanga, sadhus, sant, shraddha. All this is inculcated because these are all sattva gunas, so that slowly the tendency will start leviating upwards. And then when this happens, then what happens? A person who is of a sattvika predisposition, he shall always have least interest in the surroundings, more interest in the Lord. This least interest in surroundings or Vishaya will help him in reducing or controlling Yama Niyama of his own. So then such a person will eat less, get up early in the morning, will enjoy studying the Shastras, and not only enjoy, he will understand it faster, because understanding is Sattva Guna. Jnana is Sattva Guna Pradarshana. So that is why whole exercise of a sadhaka is to inculcate as much Sattva Guna as possible. So that is the reason why Prarabdha shall put you where you are. Why are you born in India? There is no reason you can give whatsoever except Prarabdha. How are you exposed to the Patanjali Yoga Shastra early in the morning on Tuesday? Because you had studied it earlier and there is a tendency in you to study it further. That means we are all definitely punyavan to the extent that we are studying Patanjali. There are so many who have not even heard of the name Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Why one Mr. Albert from Guatemala has not heard of Patanjali? Sir, no prarabdham for him. So whenever, first of all, we should look inside and find out, introspect and find out our tendencies. What tendency I have? I am a very lazy person. That means tamoguna is predominating. My past has been full of tamoguna. Dimag mein nahi jata. It is very difficult, you know, all these Upanishads, somehow I don't like it. That means we have never studied it. However, if the mind says, no, I must study it. I must tell truth. I should not lie. I should be loyal to my wife. I should not look. All these tendencies are sattva gunas. So based on what gunas are coming, our prarabdha tells us that thing. So kriyamana and the freedom to do the things, the kriyamana is ability to respond to the situation. Situation is created by prarabdha. Response is created by the prayatna. Is it not that most of the rishis had lots of trouble when they were doing, they never mind. Ramakrishna Paramahansa had a cancer. Is it not that he had pain? He had pain. Then how did he respond to it? The response was through kriyamana. As far as this was concerned, it was part of the avatar prarabdha. He was an avatar, but avatar also has prarabdha. In fact, avatar borrows prarabdha from Maya to get born. So that is why, as far as our length of our life is concerned, we should never be bothered. I may be 110 or 30, doesn't matter. How you lead those 39 years of Vivekananda are far more than thousands of years of life. However, during that life, in order to remain healthy, must be our primary concern. There are many people who are extremely cautious of their health, but they die of heart attack. One of the famous cardiothoracic surgeon of Bombay, most famous rather, died of heart attack. And he was taking all the precautions. So what happened? Prarabdham. It is powerful. But during the period that he was working, how did he become the famous cardiothoracic surgeon? By taking care of his health. So the propensity to take care of your health is a part of sattva guna in you. You must do that. However, it is not for number of years, but to lead healthy life. Why? Because considering body as a machine to achieve higher goal, I must be healthy because this body is consecrated to God. Lord doesn't like people with bad bodies to come to him, because you will not be able to feel the Lord. The Lord has to come. That is called a chitta prasannata. We are going to come to that in the very next sutra. Chitta prasannata. We have heard of chitta shuddhi so many times. Patanjali Maharaj is now going to describe in the next sutra what is precisely chitta shuddhi. We are going to come to that. And not only that, he is going to tell it theoretically, we are going to get some practical hints about how to do the chitta shuddhi. Hari.
Thank you.
Hari.
Sanjay, one last question. You know, on this Alabdha Bhumika, you mentioned when after effort samadhi is not attained. Now, how is that an obstacle? I mean, it's a phenomenon, or you make something, you try your best, and then you don't. Is it because is there some allied interpretation of somebody getting dissatisfied, not reaching there, or I'm not clear. Can you just explain that?
No, alabdha bhumikatva means when you are trying to reach to samadhi, what pulls you down? These samskaras pull you down. The thing that pulls you down from samadhi or does not let you reach samadhi is samskara. That is why it is called apara vairagya. And samadhi requires para vairagya. So whenever the samskaras of whatever we have done in the past, whatever, it pulls you down, then it is that those samskaras are also obstacles. So alabdha bhumikatva, not to have samadhi, is also an obstacle. After reaching samadhi, why do you come again? Actually, you are released. Why should you come back again? Because again the samskaras pull you back. That's what we saw in Sampradnyat Samadhi, different stages. So that is why, because of these samskaras, which are very fine prints, they are still pulling you down. That is the reason why, sir, it is said that even sattva guna is a big impediment. The anandam that you get in yoga sadhana while doing samadhi is an impediment. Anandam, imagine anandam, you should be actually basking in the glory of happiness. That also is why, because anandam is different thing, sukham is different thing. You are reaching at a stage where there is nothing, no sukham, no dukkham. No, so having any kind of a feeling of even happiness is an obstacle. So sattva guna, nistraigunyo bhava Arjuna. You're supposed to transcend all the three gunas. But the process is one by one, from tamas to rajas, rajas to sattva, sattva to beyond. So that is why that sattva guna, which is a last obstacle, which kind of obstructs you from reaching the samadhi avastha and failing to maintain it, alabdha bhumikatva and anavasthitam, both are also considered as antaraya. Hari.
Okay. Thank you.
Hari.
Sanjay ji, if time permits, I have two very simple clarification questions. So one is the mind, if I was from the older talks, the mind actually at one time can only do one thing. So when you talk of an exercise like walking, I think, is my understanding correct? It's basically about trying to focus on any one thing for extended period and not jump from one to the other. That's what we are attempting to do in any exercise.
Yes, correct, absolutely correct. When you do one thing, you should attempt one thing physically as well as mentally. The mental part is more important. Let us take a very small example. Every one of us should try. In everyday life, yoga can be tried. So let us say now we all are going to have our breakfast. Be in the breakfast completely. Focus yourself on each and everything that you are eating and see how the taste alters. See, there are certain things which you have never bothered to attend to. The taste in the mouth changes. The process and the experience of taking the breakfast will change if the focus is there. And see the mind, observe the mind, see how it will start running away from the breakfast towards the office. It will run away towards something else. It will run away towards some future. It will run away towards some investments. All that has to be stopped. Bring it back again on the food that you are eating. Look at the color of the food. Look at the way it is kept in the plate. Spherical, in a ball form. Then when you're taking your fork and cutting the thing, observe the process of cutting. The pork is getting pierced into that particular object. Then you're putting it in the mouth. In the mouth, there is a touch of the thing which is so tasty and juicy, has touched just the tongue. The saliva has started mixing with it. These are all acts of focus and concentration. Let us not isolate meditation in daily life and meditation in the puja room. These are not two different things. Similarly, when you are driving, be focused on the drive. When you're walking, be focused on the walking. How am I walking? Where are my legs? What is happening? We are walking, but our mind is everywhere. So every time you try to bring it's like a mercury that is getting distributed at different places. You collect it again together in the palm of the hand. Similarly, collect the mind back into the place where it is. When you are taking baths, see by immersing in the bath how much bath you will enjoy. Look at the soap that you're taking. Each and every part of the body, you're applying the soap. The warm water is coming on the body. Feel that body coming on the body. These are all acts of focus and concentration.
Sanjay ji, last clarification questions. Both Meenakshi and me quite argue on that, and as usual, I am on the receiving end. So, one thing that you often refer to is not letting your mind get disturbed by unnecessary facts, right? And I can understand because it's all, I understand that context because it's about focusing the mind on the relevant things. That is about studying. However, any of the commentaries that I've read of inspiring leaders, including Gurudev, do talk about these individuals being very aware. They do not, when you speak to them, they are not non-aware. They know what is the world. They know what are the different countries. They know the different cultures. They know what is happening in the world today. So for example, you often talk about the economic crisis, and honestly, nothing I can do with the economic crisis. But not knowing it somehow to me feels that you're trying to run away. So I'm not able to reconcile the two.
Very good question. I think you have really hit the nail on the coffin. The issue of that question is, how is it that you can be oblivious to the world while all the realized souls are completely aware of the world? And the answer lies in the fact that when they come in the world, they know how to come in the world. When we are in the world, we don't know how to be in the world. So first what you do is, you remove yourself from the world, reach a stage where you are supposed to reach, and then re-enter the world. Gurudeva, Swami Vivekananda, everybody re-entered in the world, and that time they re-entered with the perfection of the mind. Imperfect mind in the world creates chaos. Perfect mind in the world, in the chaos also creates a symmetry. For example, if you have an art of concentration, then a perfect master, when he comes and tries to see about Hyperloop, he will take less than few minutes to understand what Hyperloop is all about. Well, a chaotic mind, when tries to understand what the Hyperloop is, because while understanding, he will be interested in knowing how it can be of use to me. How can I use this knowledge to impress others? How much knowledge can I get from it that I know better than the others? These are called imperfect minds exercise in knowing the things. So when supposing everything in the house is put in a disorder, what do you do first? You try to reduce the number of things because you don't know how to keep them. Once you know how to keep them, then fill the entire house with the things, because now you know how to keep them. That is the difference between perfected masters entering into the world and an imperfect mind dabbling in the world. Ours is imperfect mind, so we withdraw to train ourselves how to enter in the world and then re-enter in the world. That is called Loka Sangraha in Bhagavad Gita. That is why you are not supposed to be, Gurudev says, don't leave the world. Don't go to the jungle, be in the world. That's fine, but be in the world in the perfected manner. When you want to have that perfection, it is like this. Can you not study at home? You can, but you go to the school. And once you go to the school and know how to study, then after your graduation, you never go to the school and still you study. Why? Because you know what studying is. Now the place doesn't matter. That is the difference between the two. So having the knowledge currently, keeping it to the bare minimum for your survival, so that rest of the energy is dedicated towards perfecting my mind. Once you perfect the mind well, there is no also need to learn, because at the perfection level of the mind, everything in the world automatically becomes known to you. That is precisely the mantra, Kasmin Bhagavo Vijnate Sarvam Idam Vijnato Bhavati. By knowing what, I shall know everything. And that is what people of Gurudeva's stature have learned. So where is the question of even atom bomb secret for them? If focused on, how is it that Nikola Tesla and Vivekananda could discuss about the future of light propagation? That is simply because one studied it as a subject, other knew it by what is called as intuitive knowledge, yoga jnanam, which becomes, and that is why the entire second padam is devoted to this. You will be amazed with the sutras that are going to come in second padam, the achievements that a yogi can do, but that is a perfect mind in imperfect world. Ours is imperfect mind in imperfect world. That is why a imperfect mind should try to reduce the imperfect world. So reduction. For a perfect mind, let the chaos be there. It will not affect. Hari Om.